only have an hour, and we have a lot of really interesting information, really fantastic panelists here. You're in the non-quantifiable exchanges panel, for those of you who just wandered into the room. We've got Dan Robles from the Ingenesist project to my left, and then Mickey Krimmel from Neighbor Goods, and finally Chris Hewer from Social Media Club. I'll let them all explain a little bit what they're doing, as well as how that relates to non-quantifiable exchanges. So Dan, let's start with.
Well, thank you very much. The Ingenesist project is located in Seattle, and it started out originally in NAFTA. I was part of the negotiation for engineers in the NAFTA agreement 20 years ago, the dawn of modern globalization. And the objective was, how can we treat knowledge like a financial instrument? It was like the first attempt to treat knowledge like a financial instrument in a trade agreement. That is, American engineers could go to Mexico, Mexican engineers could come to the States. And the idea was that American engineers, when they went across the border, they brought with them a financial structure. They were the vetting mechanism that could be capitalized, it could be underwritten by insurance companies, and therefore would release capital to the development of Mexico. I won't go into details, but that failed, and I know why. And I've been trying to correct this little tiny flaw for a long time. And what's interesting is all the complexity that we have about the economic situation we're in. It's very complex, and people are trying to figure it out like it's a big complex problem. We're saying it's a very, very tiny flaw that can be easily corrected if we're smart. So our objective at the Ingenesist project is to talk about how this can be done, sort of like a 90,000 foot level. And just the overview is that there's 5 elements of the financial system in Wall Street. If any one of them fails, the whole thing crashes. All those 5 elements are now present in social media, but they're not integrated. They don't behave like a system. And if they did, then human knowledge would become tangible. Okay? So the subject of this lecture, of this community, is non-quantifiable currencies. Well, what's between your ears right now is what's non-quantifiable. There is no currency which articulates that correctly. So that's what we do. We try to get this idea out. That's all we do. We're an education organization, and we just push this idea forward. And the entrepreneurs like yourself will do the right thing. We know that.
Excellent.
So I run a site called Neighbor Goods. It's a location-based social sharing service. It's kind of a tongue twister. So it's basically borrowing and renting stuff instead of buying new. You know, like borrowing your neighbor's lawnmower, renting out your bike, that sort of thing. It's meant to, our mission is threefold. It's to help people save money, help them live more sustainably, and to strengthen local communities. So I mean, we actually have some quantifiable if you're using money for that. But we do rentals and sales on the site. But primarily the activity we're seeing is borrowing and lending. It's the social side. Like people are. The wish list is driving most of our activity right now. So when someone in your neighborhood says they need something, there's 5 people that are real quick to add it. So for us, that's driving most of our activity, and so we're focusing our energies on making that easier and better for our users.
Hi, I'm Chris Hewer, and I'm the founder of Social Media Club, and I guess now the CEO or something. I don't know what we're going to call myself. Titles aren't too important to me. What we do is we actually bring people together around the world to share what they're learning from social media. And this includes people from multiple backgrounds, so we're really very interdisciplinary in nature. We're in about 180 cities around the world at the moment, and growing constantly. We've started really as a grassroots organization with the real driving principle behind what we do. If you get it, share it. The idea of sharing and openness, and the value that's created from sharing our knowledge in particular came from personal experience, but we've been out, talking about giving away knowledge and sharing it and the benefits of this for a long time. In fact, more recently I've been talking on the circuit a lot about the problem with corporations, middle management, and the problem of spreadsheets in particular, that they sort of represent the shadows on the proverbial wall in Plato's cave, and that the management has lost this other element, the tangibility, the humanity that exists behind those numbers. And as a result of that, they're making bad decisions. And I guess after talking a little bit about the Ingenesist project, that's essentially what he's trying to capture. So it fits really well with kind of some of the thoughts that we've been having and things we've been doing.
Yeah, well, just taking, knowing both the social media club and neighborhoods really well. I'm a member of both, and just finding out a little bit more about the Ingenesist project. What really struck me was that neighborhoods and social media club are really an embodiment of what Dan is talking about. And did everybody understand what he was talking about before? Because I think I'd like to dive a little deeper into that to get the discussion going, if that's possible. And unless you're all crystal clear on what the Ingenesist project.
You mentioned the 5 elements. I'd love to hear what that.
Yeah, and me too.
Well,
Thanks.
the financial system, Wall Street specifically, there's 5 things you need. You need to have a currency. That's how you store and exchange value. Okay, and the currency we all know and love is the dollar. There needs to be an inventory or an accounting system, a way to count that value, count those dollars and so forth. There needs to be institutions to keep the game fair. Vetting mechanisms, we'll call them. And that's been a big subject here. A lot of if somebody's in a game system, how do you keep everything straight? You have to have a vetting mechanism. There has to be a business plan. It's an algorithm: buy low, sell high, and I'll discuss that a little bit in a minute. And you have to have entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the people who do the fuzzy math. They take an asset at a low level of productivity, they elevate it to a higher level of productivity, and they take a profit. That's what the entrepreneurs do. In social media, we find currency is, this entire conference is an embodiment of this currency trying to get out, some new way of valuing and storing value. Okay, we'll talk about what that value is in a second. Then we need an inventory. What is between people's ears? And we talk about a knowledge inventory. I can get into some specifics, but it's a way of accounting for what's in between people's ears. That is the what will eventually support a currency, and just touching on this stuff lightly. And then the business plan in social media is to innovate, new ideas, create. So this is the innovation is the business plan, adding value through innovation. And the entrepreneurs are all of you people who are looking. They see all the value in society. You see all the value being transferred to social media with the collection of people, the collection of resources, and you're trying to capitalize that value. You're trying to put it in a higher order, and you're extracting value from it. So those are what we see happening in social media, and there's a lot of different embodiments of each of those principles. What we need to do now is integrate them, be aware of what they are, what function they play, and start talking to each other and start laying out an analogy which is perfectly equal to Wall Street. And eventually there will be a currency which is convertible with the dollar. And let me expand on something I heard earlier. The dollar is a debt-based currency. It's backed by debt. A debt is a promise of future productivity. I'm going to produce something in the future. Well, innovation is also a promise of future productivity. So that means an innovation-backed currency and a debt-backed currency are convertible, readily convertible. Okay, so if you look at the value in community, you look at the value of, say, a bridge across a river. It costs $50 million to build that bridge. If you brought that bridge to Goldman Sachs, they'd calculate the replacement cost plus minus depreciation. If you were to calculate the value of that bridge to a community, you would get $50 billion, okay, because it increases productivity by that much. So we have this factor of 1,000 to 1, meaning that social value is undervalued at a rate of 1,000 to 1 to the dollar. And that's just a place to start. It's a number we pull out of the sky, and I can back it up by many other things. Right? We throw some math at it.
But isn't that the result of the fact that we had to simplify it from the beginning? And that was the simplest way of handling it. So now we're just evolving to a more complicated model. Because the one thing that social media does is it makes things visible.
Right.
This was a challenge I was talking to you about relative to knowledge inside a corporation.
Right.
It's not visible to the outside world, so how can it be quantified? But so it's just a matter of us now evolving finally to account for the full real value.
Exactly. And what's going to happen is as the dollar starts going down in value, social currencies or social value is going to start going up, and they will reach parity eventually, in which social media will hedge the financial system.